Hi, we're here for our 5th Roman numeral in our discussion on literary devices. Remember, literary devices are the terms that we need to know to be able to effectively analyze and discuss literature. So let's review before we get to Roman numeral 5. Roman numeral 1 was plot, and we discussed the 5 stages or parts of the American short story plot structure. We had exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Roman numeral 2, then we moved on to conflict and talked about internal conflict and external conflict. Internal conflict dealt with the conflict that the character faces within themselves, associated with emotions and feelings, associated with moral choices, choosing right from wrong, that type of stuff. External conflict, there was 3 kinds. There was person versus person or group, person versus nature or animal, and then the third was person versus thing or condition. So after we talked about plot and conflict, we moved on to the story's timing last week. And we talked about sequence, we talked about foreshadowing, we talked about flashback, we talked about flash forward. And then we moved on to Roman numeral 4, which was the feeling of a story. And within that discussion, we discussed setting, how the setting of time and place add to the atmosphere, which add to the feeling of the story. We talked about tone, the overall attitude that the writer has toward his characters, toward his setting, toward his audience, so forth. And then we talked about mood and how mood in a story is created by the writer's diction or word choice, the writer's use of figurative language, and then the setting and the atmosphere. Now today we are going to look at characterization. And we want to look particularly at the way the writers create the characters within the story. The first is through direct characterization. This is when the writer tells you specifically what a character is like. Examples are good, evil, lazy. Then we have indirect characterization, which uses clues in the story to decide what kind of person the character is. The clues may be descriptions of how the character acts, speaks, or thinks, or how other people respond to the character. So our 2 types of characterization, or the way that the writer creates the character within the story, are direct characterization and indirect characterization. Then we want to look at some character labels. When we read about our character from the beginning of the story to the end, there are certain labels that can connect with that character. We have protagonist, who is the main character in the story. We have antagonist, the character that the main character struggles against, and the subordinating characters, minor characters within the story. So let's think about this for a minute. If we're looking at the protagonist of The Most Dangerous Game, who would it be? Yeah, right, it's going to be Rainsford. He is the main character. It starts out with him and ends with him. The antagonist, the character that he struggles mainly against, of course, is, right, Zoroff. And then we have our subordinating characters, which in this situation, the subordinating characters would be Ivan and possibly even the dogs. The dogs do play a role. So we have our protagonist, our antagonist, and our subordinating characters. Then we have to look at types of characters, and this may be new to you. So with types of characters, there's some new terms that you're going to learn. We have a flat character, a character who is not fully developed in the story and almost never a main character. So if we think of Most Dangerous Game, because everybody's read that one, who would be a flat character? One that's not fully developed, that we don't know a lot about, and he's not a main character. Right, we have Ivan. We hardly know anything about Ivan. We know that he can't speak, he can't talk, that he is ex-military, that Zoroff was his commander, but other than that, we know nothing about him. Then, opposed to flat character, we have round character. A round character is that you see several different sides of his personality and his character. He's developed in the story as he would be in real life. So, if you think of Most Dangerous Game, both Rainsford and Zoroff are round characters. Because we knew who they were before they're in the story, we know who they are in the story. We see different sides of their personality. We know a lot about them. So this is our first pair, flat characters and round characters. Then we have dynamic characters. And a dynamic character is a character who changes his perspective or her perspective during the story. The change might involve a recognition about some truth of life. Okay, so if we think of Dangerous Game, can we think of a dynamic character? Right, it's Rainsford. Because Rainsford changes his opinion about the prey from the beginning of the story. Remember, he talks to Whitney, and he's saying, oh, that jaguar has no feelings about being hunted. He doesn't have feelings, no worries. But at the end of the story, he has identified himself as being prey, and he certainly has feelings about it. So not only is he round, but he's dynamic. So we would say that Rainsford is a round, dynamic character. Then we have our static character. And you know what the word static means. You know, if you're watching television and it goes out, your signal goes out and you get that that white snow across there, that's static. It doesn't change, it's just there, you don't see anything. Well, characters can be classified as static characters as well, and this means that they don't change in the story. They have no change of perspective, no change of anything. So again, if we think of our characters in The Most Dangerous Game, we think of, we've talked about Rainsford, Ivan. We decided that he was a flat character, but does he change? No. So he would be considered a flat, static character. Think about Zoroff. We talked about him being a round character because we know several aspects of him, his personality, his history, who he is, but does he change during the story? No. He's playing the game at the beginning of the story, he's playing the game at the end of the story. His perspective about it has not changed. He would be considered a round, static character. So, we have types of character being a flat character, one that we only get one dimension of, and then a round character. We get a three-dimensional image of him, all sides. We have a dynamic character, one who changes during the process of the story, and we have a static character, one who does not change during the process of the story. The next thing is we just want to look at some terms related to characterization. And I think that these are fairly simple. Motivation is our first one, and it's the reason that the character acts as he or she does. So that's pretty easy. What motivates our character? What makes him or her act or feel like they do? Then the second is dialogue, which of course is the conversation that the character has with other characters in the story. So let's review. So first we talked about the ways that a writer creates our character, which were direct characterization and indirect characterization. Then we talked about character labels, our protagonist, our antagonist, and subordinating character. Then we talked about types of characters, which were flat, round, dynamic, and static. And then we have two special terms related to characters, motivations and dialogues. Okay, so now do your note confirmation. Use your notes as you answer the questions. Then you're going to check your own answers, because these terms are quite important. We're going to be using them all year. And then I'll see you in class.